All right. Welcome, fellow alumni, and happy Western Day. I'm thrilled to be joining you as we celebrate the anniversary of Western's founding on March 7th, 1878. My name is Patrick Searle, and I am a longtime Western alumni volunteer, currently serving as a director on Western's Alumni Association. I'm also a former USCer, SOF, and King student. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lenapewack, and Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796, and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, including First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. I'd also like to recognize that Western alumni are located throughout the world. We are a global community of lifelong scholars, of ambassadors, of global citizens. It's why the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine is front of mind for many students on our campus today, for many of our friends and colleagues, for alumni around the world, especially those in Ukraine. Tonight, as we celebrate our connection to Western, let us also celebrate our Western values of freedom and democracy that we hold so deeply and that people are fighting for with their lives to protect. In the darkness of the past 2 years, we found ourselves glued to our televisions and smartphones, and right now, I am inspired by the scenes of perseverance and resilience, of underdogs overcoming against all odds. May we continue to keep them front of mind and pray the conflict ends soon. When we needed levity over the past few years, we stayed on our TVs and tablets, but if you were like me, you sought out great stories of redemption, of strength, of underdogs overcoming all odds, to find light amongst the darkness. That's why today is so special. I'm honored to be leading this virtual conversation with Erika Casupanan, a fellow alumni, a survivor winner who broke so many barriers when she won in December. Later in the program, I invite you to stick around online to enjoy a spectacular musical performance by the legendary Rick McGee. So let me tell you a little bit about Erika. Erika Casupanan graduated in 2011 from Western's Faculty of Information and Media Studies. Last year, Erika became the first female winner of Survivor in 7 seasons, as well as the first person of Filipino descent and first Canadian ever to win the show. While at Western, Erika served as president of the Media, Information, and Technoculture Students' Council and was on the University Students' Council when I was there. Tonight, we're going to talk all about her experience on the show, how she prepared, how she succeeded, how she outwitted, outlasted, outplayed, and what lies ahead for her. During our chat, you are welcome to submit questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We are also recording this session and we'll be sharing it with registrants following the wrap up. So, Erika, happy Western Day. It's so great to see you.
Hi, Pat Searle. Can I call you Pat? Are we still on that friendly level?
Of course, of course. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you. Happy Western Day to you too.
I know. So yesterday we got together for the first time in over 10 years for coffee, and we picked back up like we were at the Spoke eating over a bagel. But I forgot to ask, is the hair purple because you love Western so much?
You know what? Since today is Western Day, the answer is yes.
Thank you. That's great. Well, listen, we have so much to cover. It's going to fly by. So I put out a call on social media. I put out a call earlier for questions to come in. There's so many questions. We're going to try to get to them. But a lot of people, want to know, how did you prepare for Survivor? Or another question, since you've actually been stranded on a deserted island, what should I bring?
I mean, in my case, you can't bring anything. I think all you can bring is whatever you have inside. So the skills, the ingenuity, the strengths, the weaknesses, that's going to be enough to carry you forward on an island. Like I have never camped and I managed to live. But I think when it comes to preparing for the show, so a lot of viewers know that I was actually supposed to play the game in 2020. And surprise, surprise, in March 2020, all of a sudden there was no international travel. So I had to wait a year before I could actually film the show.
Mm.
And I think the version of me that would have played in March 2020 was so focused on doing everything perfectly and having control over the situations that I was in. Like I went to so many gyms, I was listening to podcasts about game theory, I was studying all of the episodes. I needed to have everything perfect and ready. And then COVID happens and you realize you'll never be perfect and ready. You kind of have no control over anything. So during my year of sitting at home waiting to be on Survivor, I ended up signing up for Second City classes and I actually took a lot of comedy classes. And through those improv classes, I learned improv is so much about being able to deal with what gets thrown at you. Everyone talks about the yes and principle in improv, which is knowing that whatever your partner on stage offers to you, you're going to know you'll be able to accept the offer and move forward. And I think that having that, and then also having the experiences of living through the pandemic and learning to live without being fully in control of what's happening, but know that you're kind of in control of yourself. I think that taking that mindset into Survivor in 2021 allowed me to be more flexible. It allowed me to be more open and adaptable and to be okay with whatever twists and turns got thrown at me and to be okay with knowing when to play more forwardly or knowing when to play with more restraint because I had developed more of a trust in myself in being able to handle the unexpected.
And you're bearing your soul sitting in those confessionals. And so you need to know yourself in order to be successful in a reality show. And so you said you don't think you would have won if you actually won in 2020, but here you are in 2022, you won in 2021. How much of your, you studied films, you understand like the Marshall McLuhan, the messages, the medium world, like how much of studying at Western in films prepared you to be on a reality show in 2021?
When I studied films, I learned that you can't really take anything you see on at face value. And even though it's a reality show, there's only so much that's real. Not to say that it's scripted and that, we're actors and everything was figured out and we knew what the outcome was going to be. Not at all. But I think that when it comes to Survivor, since it's such an institution, so many people, myself included, it's their life dream to be on the show. And I think it's so easy to put so much stock into the game and the game really dictating what your self-worth is. But I think being a FIMS grad and having that critical thinking, I went into the game. I'm not just focused on the game. I'm looking at what's happening with production. I'm thinking about, okay, what do I think the show wants to accomplish here? And I was able to really create this barrier between, it being a fun game versus it being real. Because at the end of the day, I knew this is a weird fantasy world I'm in. And if I just accept that, then that helps me to stay sane. So really the FIMS studies that I did, it really helped me to, again, know that even though it's reality TV, it's not real. And I think that allowed me to have a bit more sanity in the game. And it also allowed me to stay objective and really stay the course in moving forward and moving towards the end.
But for those who watch the show, they would know that you ended up on an island by yourself. So even if you had watched all of the series before and you knew everything that was going to be thrown at you, you probably didn't see that coming. How did you get through just living on that island remote with a camera person just watching you as it rained all day?
I mean, it sucked. There's a lot of footage of me crying. I think that there's no shortage of video somewhere in the world of me just crying for 2 days. And you see me say it on the show. My nightmare was to go and live by myself for one night, and I did it for 2. And I think that what helped me get through it, especially the nights, because the nights were brutal, it poured rain both of the nights, is really knowing that I had a strong network and I had a strong community who would be rooting for me back home, even though the majority of people I knew didn't know that I was on Survivor. So there were actually moments when It would be pouring rain. It would be nighttime. I couldn't sleep because I needed to sit there and keep this fire going. And I would actually think to myself, oh, I'm not alone right now, because if this person at home knew I was here, they'd be cheering for me. And if this person at here knew, they'd be cheering for me. So I started just kind of going through the faces of all of the people I knew who loved me and who would support me. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And it was really having that strong community that helped me to get through those 2 days, even if they weren't physically there with me.
There's a question in the chat. Did you really not eat anything? Like, is that the real life story of a Survivor contestant? It's just rice or nothing?
Well, we didn't even have the luxury of having rice on our season. As the viewers knew, Jeff decided to make it even harder than usual. So we had to truly live off of the land. So whatever we could find, whatever we could catch, that's what we could eat. It wasn't until I was exiled that I got my first jar of rice. And it was just like a jar this big that I had to ration for the 2 days.
When you've got back to land in Canada, is there any food that was on the island that you'll never touch again?
I don't know if there's something I won't touch again, but I get really weird about eating coconut now. It just gives me bad memories. And it's like coconut is such a weird texture and it's so inconsistent. I was just so over it by the end.
That's interesting. You talk about community, and you were filming and no one may have known that you were on except for close friends and family. And even when you got back, you probably couldn't even tell much about your experience. What is it like building a community on an island? Western, if we look at it geographically, it's almost like a little island, and it's an island of communities. That's why we knew each other, because we were involved in communities on campus. How does it work when you're in a remote island with people from all over, different backgrounds and experiences? How do you build community on an island?
I think that when I was at Western and being part of so many communities, and yes, Pat Searle and I were peers at Western, we shared a lot of great laughs over our years there. And I think that it really was about creating these different communities where there was some type of shared value or some type of shared interest. But at the heart of it, it created the space where you felt belonging and you felt like there was a level of safety. So whether it was me being part of the Orientation Week community, part of the USC, the FIMS faculty, and I even had a part-time job. I was working at Masonville at Build-A-Bear. So I was part of the Build-A-Bear community. It's like I had this place where I felt like I belonged all throughout my Western experience. And I think when I look back at Western, my favorite parts of my experience were all of the memories I have within all of these different communities. Mm-hmm. And I think when it came to Survivor and it came to building the key relationships that I had there, it really came down to who did I have those shared values with? And a lot of people know Heather and I became true and close friends on the show. I still talk to her all the time. I was on the phone with her for hours before this. And even though Heather and I on paper seem so different, we really had a shared experience as women. So Heather is someone who grew up in the South, very traditional, and she got married a bit later than people normally would within her cohort. And she had a lot of those life moments that you would normally have with a partner, like buying a home. She would do that on her own. And me, even though I look quite young, since we know I graduated in 2011, I'm actually a little older and I'm nowhere close to getting married. And I think it's easy for women to feel some type of pressure when it comes to their decisions around getting married and all of those traditional life milestones. So Heather and I were able to bond over that. And because of that, we've created this bond between us where there was real love and there was real belonging. And what the viewers didn't see is when I was off on exile by myself, Heather was the only one behind my back vouching for me, getting people to give me a chance and to wait to meet me. And when I came back from exile, she just looks at me like a proud parent. We're hugging. We're so happy. And I realized that because we were able to build this connection and this community between the two of us, I had somebody who truly loved me on the show. And that was so valuable to have out there.
And did the pandemic add time to your experience in the show because of being there early or anything? Did you feel that you were able to actually get to know people more, or did they keep you away when you got to the island and quarantined you separately and then you didn't really know anyone? How did that all work?
Yeah, we had extra time where we were in Fiji before we started to film the show, because we had our 2 weeks we needed to quarantine. And then, of course, there's a few days of things you need to do before the show starts filming. So we would see each other. I would see people from my balcony. We were exposed to other people, but we were never allowed to talk. But then we were always looking at each other, trying to form all of these judgments about people. So I think you have this idea of what people are like in your head before you meet them. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they weren't.
Interesting. Okay, that's fantastic. So you talked about Heather. It was rainy. Like, how do you just, take care of your mental health while you're on the island? Like, how, like you're alone and and everyone's kind of wanting to win. So what does that look like? How do you kind of check in when you're by yourself?
I think for me, what was helpful is during the year of the pandemic when we just needed to sit by ourselves. And I think that everyone was trapped in their brains because the usual things we could do were no longer available to us. I did a lot of self-reflection. I also have gone to psychotherapy for years, love psychotherapy, highly recommend it. And I think that having that time between the two potential filming dates of the show, I think I really got to know myself. I really got to understand, my strengths, my weaknesses. And then most of all, I came to really accept myself and accept who I was, whether it was the good and the bad. And I think because of that, I had a lot of trust in myself. So once we were actually playing the game, I think that it can be easy to feel really eager to deliver on things that as a viewer, you think you need to be doing. But then I would constantly check in on myself and say, okay, like, is this something that I feel like I need to do because I feel like I need to, I don't know, make a big move or do this or do that? Or do I need to make a decision that I truly know is the right one for me and I need to trust my gut? And I think that, having that practice over the pandemic allowed me to choose the trust your gut route more.
It's interesting. Danielle in the chat, being on reality TV is a vulnerable experience since you can't predict how the audience will react to you on screen. So Erika, you're talking about really just knowing yourself and trusting yourself. How did you think about this risk pre-Survivor? And then how do you navigate it today with trolls and memes and anyone that might be nasty on social media, as we know it can be?
Yeah, I think that I did a lot to mentally prepare for what it would be like. And I think that even we speak to psychologists in relation to the show. And when I came back from filming the show, the psychologist had prepared me to know that when you do well, people will want to tear you down. It's just an unfortunate part of human nature. But in my case, I ended at the top. So that would mean I'm going to be vulnerable to a lot of criticism. There'd be a lot of people coming for me. So I think that I had started to prepare myself before the show even started to air for whatever criticism would be coming. I will say, once you experience it, it's pretty crazy. I think that if you're going to be on reality TV, you really need a strong sense of self, because I was attacked. I've had very awful things written to me, whether on the internet or privately in my DMs. And what was good is I had the mental preparation before. I had the strong network of people in my life. I knew that no matter what people were saying about this edited character that was on TV, that it doesn't affect who I am. It doesn't affect my real world or my future. So I think I had to really take it with a grain of salt and also disconnect from a lot of it so that it no longer was really intruding into my actual real world.
When we met yesterday, we chatted about our parents, and for you, your mom and dad, they came to Toronto to watch the viewing parties, but you couldn't tell them anything. So what did it feel like keeping that secret the entire series, that you were going to be the winner? And then, there you are, and they're standing next to you on the stage. It's such a fantastic clip of the reaction. How did that feel?
It was amazing. I mean, me not saying anything to my family, I think there was a few reasons why. I think one, I really wanted them to have that surprise and to have that moment at the end. And I think the other is I have dreamed about winning Survivor when I was a kid. So imagine you go and you play this crazy game and you're on the plane home and it dawns on you like, oh my God, I actually just achieved my childhood dream. What the F. I don't know if I can say that word on here. I won't. But it's hard to wrap your head around. So I feel like I also needed to really sit with it for a bit by myself and really think, wow, I actually did it. I actually checked that off. And then I think that that also helped me as the show started to air. But truly, I just wanted my family to have that moment at the end. And I think to see them so happy, it was so worth the few months of having to lie for a bit.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Stephanie Fims 16 says, as a Survivor fan who knew a lot about the show already, were there still elements that surprised you when you played the game? P.S. Congrats. I was rooting for you. I think a lot of people are on the chat rooting for you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I think that what surprised me is how much more complex it actually is when you're watching the show. Sorry, when you're playing the game versus watching the show. And I think that, again, this is like the Fims part in me realizing that there's a lot of stuff that happens in the game. And then the TV show is like, they have to figure out what are the clips to really oversimplify this and to make it something that a mass audience of millions of people who probably don't even look up from their phones to look at the screen, like how do they make this complex story make sense to people who are watching the show? So then when you're actually in it, you realize there is a lot going on. For every plan, there's the cover up plan you tell the target. There's like another plan that you would tell the other target who you would go after if you need to split the votes. And there's like the plan to tell somebody who's not the target, but who's not your closest ally. And that's one person's plan. And everybody has a plan. So then there's all these fake versions of the plan that's up in the air and that you're kind of trying to work through. And I think that it required me to really trust my gut and also use the critical thinking skills that I had developed through the FIMS program to think, okay, what is anyone's actual intention here? Like, what is this? What motivates this person? What are they trying to achieve here? And then using that to really distill, okay, I think that this is what everyone thinks the real plan is. And then here's how I'm going to respond to it.
Interesting. I have a few more questions, but the chat, there is one. Can you ask her about how she chose the clothes and headband she wore? Loved her distinctive look on the show. Was there a strategy behind that?
There is absolutely a strategy behind the clothes. I loved the wardrobe situation. And fun fact, I mean, there's all sorts of things I can say about the wardrobe, but fun fact, when I was originally cast to play the game in 2020, I was actually supposed to be on the yellow tribe. So I originally submitted all these yellow clothes and then they switched me to the blue tribes. They're like, okay, we'll take some things that work for yellow. And then we have to take some things from your jury clothes that can work for blue. And you have to buy me some new things. But I looked for a combination of things that, one, I wanted to wear a lot of Canadian retailers. So I wanted to look for different Canadian brands. I also wanted to look for things that still are stylish, but then also are a little functional and might have some more meaning for me. So an example is the blue shirt that I wore with the puff sleeves. People were like, it's not practical to wear puff sleeves, but I'm like, that's linen and linen will dry and you do not want clothes that don't dry. Right. And with the headband was honestly so practical. It keeps your hair out of your face. You can wear it in challenges. And production told me that they wanted me in a headband. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get the most extra headband that I can find.
I want to just wrap up on a few questions. You win. Congratulations on winning. How does that feel when you realize that you're not just winning a game, but you're representing the communities that you come from? You were the first woman in 7 seasons to win. You were the first person of Filipino descent. You're the first Canadian, since Canadians have been allowed in the show, to win. How does that all compound and feel? And what does it mean to you to be that type of winner?
I think for me, that's the most important part because unsurprisingly, as a FIMS grad, I was someone who as a kid just was so enamored by pop culture. And I also knew that there were people on TV who typically don't look like me. And I know that a lot of people have that type of experience. And I think that when I got the feedback from people from these different communities, whether they're women, Filipinos, Asians, immigrants, anybody who has felt underestimated or dismissed in any way. And for them to feel joy and for them to feel a sense of victory in my win, I think was the most rewarding part, because I know how important it is to see images of someone like you winning on TV and what that can do for how you feel about yourself, what that can do for how other people start to treat you or other people who are like you. And I think that making that type of impact was the biggest gift and the biggest honor.
Impressive. Like, this has been really fun talking about your Western past, your survivor present, and what you're still, processing in many ways being a winner. What's next for Erika Casupanan?
Well, before the show, I had been working in PR for about 10 years, but what I love about the show is it gives me the opportunity to now go back to what I was most passionate about. And it's really media. And I'm really looking forward to getting into more work in broadcasting, in terms of more on-camera media personality work. And through my work in PR over the last 10 years, I'm very grateful for the experiences. During that time, I was largely propping up other people to be able to tell their stories. So now I'm looking forward to being able to tell the stories that I think are important.
And we look forward to that story. Thank you so much, Erika, for joining us tonight. Everyone, Erika is not only just a proud Western alumni, but she represents so many communities. And again, that is what brings us all together at Western. So Erika, thank you. Happy Western Day. Thank you for joining us tonight. I want everyone to stick around for something that Erika and I would do after USC meetings on Wednesday nights. We would go downstairs in the UCC and listen to Rick McGee. Please stick around and please enjoy this recorded performance by the legendary Rick McGee. We'll see you after.
Thank you so much.